Hello and welcome to AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I'm your host, John S. Today's episode features Mark C. from Wichita Falls, Texas, who talks about his recovery, holy wars, and doubling down on love and tolerance. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Nice to talk to you.
Good talking to you. You say you just got back from a meeting.
Yeah, I just walked in the door.
How was it?
Well, it's fine. Well, I go to a conventional meeting here in town.
Yeah.
And a conventional meeting at a conventional group.
Right.
And there were, tonight there were 14 people there, and 6 of those people were atheists.
Is that unusual for that meeting?
It's usually not nearly half and half, but there will usually be several atheists in the room.
That's kind of interesting.
And approximately half of the people in the room completely opted out of the Lord's Prayer, which is typical as well.
That's really interesting. Now, Mark, where exactly are you? You're like in West Texas, right?
Yeah, I'm in Wichita Falls, Texas. We're about 120 miles northwest of Dallas-Fort Worth.
Okay.
On Highway 287. And if you continued on that road, you would eventually wind up in Amarillo.
Oh,
Texas,
okay. Okay, gotcha.
So we're about halfway between Amarillo, Texas, up in the Panhandle, and Dallas-Fort Worth.
Gotcha. All right. So I figure, and that's actually a pretty good sized city then, Wichita Falls.
Well, we're around 100,000 people.
Okay.
Give or take.
It's kind of funny when you get to know somebody on Facebook. I always have this impression that you're living in some dusty little desert town somewhere. Not the case.
Well, it's pretty much everything out here is dusty. It's little. That's in our county, for example, there are 150,000 people.
Okay.
In our entire county.
Right.
And then here in Wichita, we've got about 100,000. And a lot of those are, we have an Air Force base here, which is a NATO training base for fighter pilots.
Oh, okay.
For our NATO allies
okay.
and our own U.S. troops. And so we've got a lot of guys from all over Europe here. And so that makes things kind of interesting, too.
Okay. Well, I was just kind of wondering because I thought, around here, I don't know if I've ever been to a meeting where there's been that many open atheists. And just about every single meeting here closes with the Lord's Prayer. But if I remember right, are you the one that kind of started the not saying the Lord's Prayer and it kind of started catching on at that group?
Yeah, I was. I guess part of my story we'll talk about.
Yeah.
It kind of lightly touches on what I call a holy war,
mm-hmm.
Which pretty much went on incessantly for the first 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But about, when I came in very early on, I would attempt to, be feeling like I was a part of, and I would stand in the circle.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm not praying.
Mm-hmm.
I am an atheist, but yet I was made to feel that really I shouldn't be in that circle. There would be snarky remarks. There would be, look, the atheist is praying. We got him praying. It'll be any time now.
Yeah.
This kind of noise. And then some people would just look at me and smirk and give me the evil eye and stuff. And eventually, it didn't take too much of that in the context of this, a lot of other very negative things that were going on, for me to say, you know what, that's horseshit. That's intellectually dishonest.
Yeah.
You stand here and do this.
Yeah.
And as a matter of principle, I refuse to do it.
Yep.
Prayers, theistic beliefs have nothing to do with me getting sober.
Yep.
Nor part of my recovery from this hopeless state of mind and body. And to be intellectually, rigorously honest about that was a challenge. And when I opted out, that of course just fed into the ongoing holy war.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a big issue was made out of that.
Yep.
It took me a little time in that context to figure out how to respond to the backlash from simply opting out of the prayer. And, when pretty much anything you ever say is vocally attacked in public in front of everybody, what do you do with that?
Yep.
It took a little while for me to begin to figure out, well, just how do I explain myself in this circumstance, this environment? And it eventually, the preamble, of course, helped me do that. logically, if you look at the preamble, AA is not affiliated with any religion or sect.
Right.
And the Lord's Prayer is technically Protestant prayer.
Yeah, the one that we say in AA is a Protestant version, isn't it?
Absolutely is. Yeah. It's not Our Father.
Right.
And a good Catholic, if he's square with his theology and the teaching of his church, he's not going to be involved in religious exercises usually with non-Catholics.
Right.
I mean, a lot of Catholics still are like that and think like that. Early AA history had some problem with that.
That's right. That's right.
Clarence, the guys up there from North Akron.
That seemed to be like in the early days of AA. That was really the primary concern, is trying to make it acceptable for Catholics, rather than worrying about.
Well, yeah, I don't know if it was unacceptable to Catholics. It was unacceptable to Catholics. Clarence and those guys, that was part of their problem. Their religious superiors were saying, "What are you guys doing down there?" The rest of that's history. And they really took off from there.
Yep.
But it was interesting. But eventually I came down to that narrative that Protestant Christian beliefs nor any Christian beliefs are not part of what got me sober or how I live sober today.
Yep.
And I respect your right to have any path you like and to practice any ritual you like, but I'm going to have to just be a conscientious objector, a principled dissent position. And it was surprising I was the only one. And, we humans are kind of sheepish, we like to herd up.
We do.
And collect together in these little flocks. The outlier is a problem. And so part of that, I guess for about, I don't know, I guess I noticed maybe after about a month of sitting out this prayer, I noticed somebody else sitting out across the room. He's sitting out of the prayer. And pretty soon another one, then another one, then another one. And so it's to the point now, without any kind of a floor fight, without any kind of emotion, motion as in Robert's Rules of Order motion.
Right.
At pretty much any given meeting we may have roughly half the people completely opt out of the Lord's Prayer and have the freedom to do that without, having to put up with a bunch of BS about it.
Yep.
While the Christian Protestant or Catholic contingent can have that as part of their deal, and nobody, gives anybody any guff about it. That's how I approached it. And over time, that has had some influence on others to say, I don't really like doing that either. I'm not going to do that either.
I tell you, man, I admire you for doing that. I could see that probably could have worked at my old home group if I would have tried doing that. Because, God, there are a lot of people there that, they didn't take it too serious. They just said it because that's what you do. And I think if they would have really thought about it, they probably would have started sitting out. They'd see other people sit out.
Yeah.
But,
and once they begin to hear a narrative, and if that narrative is coming from our literature, the preamble, for example, and you have the opportunity to maybe explain yourself a little, then it seems to carry some weight,
it's kind of funny, but, it's only like in the Midwest and the South, I guess in Canada too, where the Lord's Prayer is being said in AA meetings. I guess they don't do it in New York, and the East Coast, or like in California. I guess they don't say the Lord's Prayer. Maybe some of the meetings do, but I guess the U.S. is still pretty into it.
Well, sure. And we, Protestant fundamentalists and evangelicals are probably the lion's share of most religious believers that flock to AA. We do have a few Catholics here.
Yep.
They have trouble with the Lord's Prayer.
The last time I ever went to my old home group, when I told them, and that's the only time I told them I was an atheist, and I don't go to their meetings anymore. And after that, this Jewish guy came up to me. I told him about this agnostic meeting. He says, "So you guys don't say that stupid fucking Lord's Prayer, do you?" I said, "No, we don't." I said, "Do you not like the Lord's Prayer?" He says, "I hate that goddamn thing." And I said, "Well, why didn't you ever say anything?" He said, "Oh, it's not even worth the trouble," he told me. But I think it would have been worth the trouble if he would have let people know just how much he hated it and hated saying it, that maybe people would listen to him. But that's going on in AA all over the place right now.
Oh, sure. My first few years sober, I was still traveling with what I do for a living.
Yeah.
And I went to AA meetings in 7 states, and every meeting I went to closed with.
Yeah.
And as a result of me not doing that and being open about who I was, I've met a few atheists here and there along the way. Well, I say everyone, except for one meeting I went to. There's a We Agnostics meeting up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And, of course, they did not say it. But I found it a little boring. Mm-hmm. And I'll say why. Because everybody was pretty much on the same page about everything.
Oh, you mean at the agnostic meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They, and that meeting, I think, as I recall it, there was a lot of religion bashing and stuff. And, I am not opposed to doing that in the proper context. I have a little fun with it. But, that's not what I'm there.
No.
That's not a good AA,
That happens sometimes in these meetings, these agnostic meetings. Our group goes through it periodically. It kind of depends upon who is there and where they're at in their recovery or whatever, or their experience just kind of dealing with traditional AA. Because people get, I don't know, they just have to get it out of their system because they've either been beaten down for years, trying to conform to other people's beliefs, or they've just realized that they don't buy it anymore, and it's just kind of a shock to their system. But we went through that for a while at our group. We had quite a period, kind of a rough period where some people really had some hurt feelings about how they were treated by their old home group, and they were just so relieved to have another AA meeting they could go to talk about it that. Boy, that was like the subject for a long time about these, what was wrong with AA, basically. But yeah, I don't like it either. It doesn't really help with what we're really there for. And speaking of that, Mark, I was reading your story. Yeah. You've had a long, you had a long descent into alcoholism, and then you had a long road to atheism. This isn't anything that happened to you just like overnight. I thought that was kind of interesting. You want to kind of go into a little bit about your journey and how this all happened, from alcoholism to recovery and from belief to atheism?
Well, yeah, sure. I was about 8 or 9 years old when I took my first drink. We were at a 4th of July celebration, big family event, large family. And my little cousin and I were the youngest 2 little squirts running around there, and some of the older timers decided it was time for these boys to, find out about stuff. Right. And they made us drink a beer,
Yep.
They had these big old galvanized wash tubs full of ice beer everywhere. They made us sit there in these little lawn chairs, suck down that beer.
Yeah.
Because we were being curious,
Right.
And we both got hammered.
Mm-hmm.
And sick, and I just hated it. And my cousin, he didn't hate it.
No.
And he, by the time he was in high school, he wasn't full blown out. By the time he was in his early 20s, he was in full blown drug addiction as well, jails and hospitals, running from the law, and all kinds of stuff. He died of cirrhosis of the liver at 32.
God.
And so. I just remembered, I came out of that experience with an aversion to alcohol. I didn't like the effects of it.
And how long did that last?
That lasted for quite a while, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I smoked my first joint at 12 years old. I discovered I liked marijuana.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 17, I was smoking all the time, and I was using amphetamines heavily all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I was managing a weird schedule I had with those 2 substances. And in the interim there, all through that, there were all kinds of other drugs, a lot of LSD, hash, peyote, stuff like that, But I walked away from all that when I joined the service.
Yep.
And never really looked back on it. I drank a few times in there, as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill, I remember one time.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back on it from my perspective now at, 60, the last few years I've been examining my life about this, I realized that I couldn't remember any time that I drank that it just didn't go kind of weird and crazy.
Yeah.
That it was always to excess. And I don't know if I mentioned that in my story or not.
Mm-hmm.
But that seemed to be the predominant theme of me and alcohol.
Yep.
I'd get sick, but I never got sick on this other stuff. See?
Right.
And that's just kind of how it sort of evolved. But like I said, I walked away from it when I joined the service.
Mm-hmm.
I drank a couple times in the service, and both those times that I recall, pretty hammered.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, a couple kind of deal.
Yeah.
But my apparent aversion to alcohol and the use of drugs was given a pretty significant boost as a result of what I call now, in the context of a transformative religious experience on a Houston freeway.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction into the beginnings of the Christian life and the Christian ideas.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
The Christian worldviews.
What you actually had like a burning bush type of an experience, right?
It was quite a bit like that. I didn't see white lights or anything, but it was life altering. It changed the way I looked at the world, the existence, and that put me on a better path in life in some real ways, because I was not raised in any of that, and so that was kind of novel to me. But I began to study the Bible just incessantly, and church history, and I suppose those two interests, developed into a much broader interest in history at large. Because if you study those two things, you're immediately drawn into the history of philosophy. You are immediately drawn into a lot of things, cultural, social histories, all kinds of stuff. Everything is interrelated. But I spent a couple of years in solo independent study like that, but didn't know any Christians. And I came out of that period on the basis of a verse in the New Testament, Hebrews, that says, "Not forsake the gathering together of yourselves, as is the habit of some, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." Hebrews 10:24 and 25 is the verse there. Kind of applies to AA in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. But that verse prompted me to reach out to others, and I began to attend this little Baptist church in Houston, Texas, and there I was, the first time I was ever really exposed to some pretty vibrant Christians who accepted me and loved me and, encouraged me, and, it just fed into the whole worldview. And you can see the same kind of thing happening in AA.
Yeah.
We come out of this isolation.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of us, we're in utter isolation at the end.
Yeah.
And maybe we spent some years in that utter isolation. I know I did.
Yeah.
But just walking back into a social setting was just a huge challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to see somebody that had something you had in common with and finding some encouragement like that, it's just profound, isn't it?
Yeah.
It can be quite powerful. So that's how I look at that. But in my early days, of course, most of the people I had began to be associated with were pretty much Bible literalists.
Yeah, that's what you mentioned.
When we look at the text of the Bible, they took it very literally. They were not modernist or liberalist, in this sense. And but over time, they say the Bible is probably the world's best handbook on atheism ever written. Voltaire had something along those lines. Most of the people who are believers don't dig in that deep to the Bible.
No.
But if you do dig in that deep, you're going to find yourself in lots of trouble.
Yeah.
And because there are some things that just don't add up.
No.
And can't add up, and eventually the wafer thin excuses about that no longer support you, and you have to just admit this thing falls to the ground.
Yep. Yeah. I find the Bible pretty interesting. I had an experience kind of like yours, although I didn't study it as much as you did, but I knew absolutely nothing about religion, and I was still drinking at this time. And I guess I was kind of miserable. So I, by myself, sat down and read the Bible cover to cover because I didn't know anything about the damn thing. And then I decided I was going to take a class about the Bible. So I went to this junior college and I took a class, the most interesting class I've ever had in my life, the New Testament as literature. So we didn't study it. Yeah, we didn't study it from a theological standpoint. We studied it as a book, as literature, and it was taught by an Episcopal priest. And it was really fascinating because then you learn, oh, this is a book that was put together by human beings. It was put together, like some of the books, like a century after, Jesus supposedly even, it was very, very interesting, but it kind of put it all in perspective, and it gives you a little bit better respect for it than if it's just taken, if you try to take it literally, it kind of ruins it, I think. But if you look at it from an historic perspective and as literature, it's really kind of interesting. And like you say, it opens up other doors because then you get interested in learning other things about what was going on during those times. So
exactly.
Yeah. So I kind of had but I didn't get into it as deep as you did. I mean, you can quote
it was
verses
my
there.
life. that whole worldview was my life.
Yeah.
It consisted of Bible study and fellowship with Christians and discipleship and scripture memory.
Wow.
You heard me quote the chapter and verse for that verse I provided to you earlier. The guys I were running with, some of those guys had memorized the entire New Testament.
Jeez.
They majored on stuff. And so that was just part of our daily routine, was memorizing the words of God.
Yeah. And during this time, when you were doing this, Mark, your drinking it was pretty manageable, right? Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'll reintroduce then alcohol into this story. So
yeah.
Get tired of theological absurdities here, but eventually I started hooking up some guys that were of the Reformed faith. John Calvin, those kind of guys were reformers in that sense. Presbyterians and Reformed guys. They, of course, were not teetotalers.
Oh, yeah.
And
okay.
I had a little bit of Bailey's Irish cream and a cup of coffee at a Christmas Eve function with my mentor, sponsor / disciple maker guy, the guy I was learning a lot of stuff from, and some of the other guys that were hanging around this outfit that we hung around with. It was called the Navigators. And the evangelicals that are in the audience will probably recognize that group. And it was very casual. But it wasn't too long after that, within a year or so, I was drinking a couple of beers after work every day. I had found that something about alcohol, this disciplined approach to it, just did something for my mind and body that I found just pleasurable. It calmed me down a bit. I just felt better. And the occupation I was in, of course, is extremely high stress.
Yeah. And
extremely demanding. A lot of public interaction and with people that are in all kinds of really horrid circumstances. And they're emotional and volatile and not generally reasonable about anything.
Yeah.
And that occupation turns out seems to crank out alcoholics by the thousands. Like cops and lawyers and doctors, these high stress occupations produce a lot of high functioning drunks.
Yep.
Yep. It's just kind of what it is. But I maintained that sort of an intake for a few years. But I was drinking daily, and over time it just slowly increased in terms of quantity.
Yeah.
And duration of when I was drinking. Kind of see it on a bar graph just takes off, and then it just goes across and gradually gets more and more and more. But at about 10 years in, I'd occasionally have this thought, well, I seem to be drinking more and faster than my buddies around me. We all drank heavily, involved in my profession considerably, and those guys had a lot of drinking. So
during that time when your drinking was getting out of control, then were you still into the religion thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was still in theistic belief. Yeah. And so it was slowly, alcohol was slowly, almost imperceptibly taking more of me than I knew. So by the 10-year period, I was going, well, maybe I'm drinking a little bit more. I'll just, and then I'd blow it off. 20 years into it, I drank for 30 years.
Wow.
20 years into it, by the time 20 years rolled around, I sort of knew that whatever this was, it was a problem. and I really need to start trying on this thing. And, you know, the memory of my cousin was in my mind.
Yeah.
I was thinking about him a lot during those days.
Yep.
I still think about him a lot. So I would try to, at that time, try to control, moderate, quit. You know, I would moderate in terms and control in terms of not drinking every day.
Right.
And then when I did drink, not drink as much for as long a period when I was drinking, you know, but, and sometimes I would have these little periods that I thought were successful. I even quit a couple of times. The longest time was for 3 months, but I started again.
Right.
And, you know, it just, instead of getting any better, it just got slowly and progressively worse. And I spent about 5 years trying everything I could do to kind of figure that out. And like I said, I had these little successes every once in a while, and it would kind of encourage me to think, well, I think you got this. I think you're getting a handle on this, you know. So this delusion, you know, had not been smashed at all, you know. I was still hoping to drink like a regular person. And I think Wilson really knocks that stuff out of the park when he's talking about that kind of thing in the big book.
Yep.
At least it resonates with me to the point where, you know, I feel confident I can repeat that to most drunks, and they'll sort of maybe get it, you know. Yeah,
that was my experience too. I'm in meetings sometimes, and people say that they never really tried to. They say, oh, they never wanted to drink normally or whatever. I don't know what I was thinking, but I think I would always tell myself when I got to drink, I was not going to get drunk. I would tell myself, tonight I'm just going to go out and have a few drinks. I'd tell myself that. But inevitably I would get drunk, you know? So I wanted to have some control over it. I wanted to have a way to drink. And sometimes, to be honest with you, I still would like to be able to drink normally, but I know I can't. But, that was a big part of my drinking, is that this time I'm going to do it right. And so, yeah, you know, I had 3 DWIs, each one a year apart, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That'll make you poor.
Oh God. Yeah. This was a long time ago, and but they were starting to get pretty, they weren't as serious about it as they are now. I mean, you go to prison now for that, but, it was getting pretty serious back then. So I was looking at like doing like 6 months in jail, which for me would have been just absolutely horrible. They gave me probation. I got lucky, but
yeah, you did.
Yeah, nowadays they go to jail. People go to jail and they get a felony for 3 DUIs.
A lot of times, unless they're well connected, they have a real good lawyer.
Yeah.
At least in this part of the neck of the woods.
Yeah.
If you're from a well connected family, and you've got good money. I know some guys that have 5 and 6 DUIs that are still walking around free.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that's the case here too.
Our system is pretty rigged.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Hard, you know. But yeah, your story is kind of where I began to find myself at about the 20-year point.
Yeah.
It had come to that point where it was just taking on a life of its own, and my drinking would take a life of its own in the sense that it would ignore my initial choices about how much I was going to drink, how long I was going to, you know, that kind of stuff. It just kind of take off.
Yeah.
So I have these little successes, but it'd be interspersed by many more periods where it was like, well, I didn't intend to do this at all, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, this is pushing me toward that point of incomprehensible demoralization.
Right.
Which I think Wilson hits that pretty good too.
He did.
You know,
absolutely.
I relate to that at least.
Me too.
But 5 years before coming into AA, I'd given up. I just gave up. And the last couple of years of it, I was pretty much always drunk. I was high functioning for so long. I had quite a bit of money stacked up, and I don't spend a lot of money. I'm kind of a cheapskate. And so I could essentially live and not work for a few years. And that's pretty much what happened. You know, over the course of those years, I started to turn down more assignments, you know, because I preferred to stay home and be drunk.
Yep.
You know, it just slowly took it all, you know. But yeah, I had thrown in the towel, and I had come to that point of surrender, really, which was part of the step one business. I know my story doesn't talk much at all about the steps. It's too wordy as it is, and maybe another story for another time. But, you know, that surrender to this fact about me and booze, that it had just kicked my ass.
Yeah.
And could not figure out a way to fix the problem. I gave up.
Yep.
And, I was pretty much always insanely drunk during that last couple of years. When I woke up, I was still drunk, and I was drinking before I was putting coffee on, and drank all day and all night till I either passed out or I blacked out. And then I'd wake up the next day and start all over.
Yeah.
And that's the way it went. And that's just kind of what it was for me there, you know. But at a point in that, during living in that sort of mental state and that level of it, I decided I wanted to live. I had become quite ambivalent about living or not living. I didn't care.
Right.
You know, I hadn't cared for quite a while. But I decided I wanted to live. I had 3 grown children from a marriage that had lasted 20 years, and I had 3 grandchildren. And the oldest one at that time was 6 years old. I had never been invited to her birthday party. I had more damn sense than to invite a drunk to a little kid's birthday party.
Yeah.
You know, and I was 30 days sober, and I got invited to a birthday party for my oldest granddaughter for the first time. And I stood on the side of the pool over there trying to hide, and I was just weeping. 30 days sober, and I was seeing some fantastic things, you know.
Yeah.
And that's just progressed. Now I have 9 grandkids, and it's just, they just keep coming along, you know. So what we were talking about.
Well, you were so you're describing the point now where you decide you want to live. So is this where you get to AA?
Well, yeah. That night, it was about 10:30. I was hammered out of my mind as usual. I'm leaning up against the countertop in my kitchen because I can't stand. And I decided I wanted to live. And my phone book is right there, and I grabbed the phone book. What I knew was I couldn't fix it by myself, that if the problem could be fixed, I was not at all confident that it could be. It would require me doing a completely different course of action. And the one thing I did know was that drunks got sober in AA.
Yeah.
AA seemed to be drunks getting sober, and I knew for a fact, I had no doubt in my mind that I was a drunk. And I called the number, and a nice lady got on the phone and told me where a meeting was and a time, and I went to my first AA meeting the next day. I think I related in my story that I had not a lot of knowledge about AA. I had looked at the 12 steps back during my period of ardent Christian belief. I had been an atheist, by the way, 15 years by the time I made the decision to reach out for help. And
okay, so that's during your drinking period, you kind of decided you lost your faith. In other words, you embraced atheism, basically.
Well, actually, that was a long. If you read Deconversion stories, which you can, like say on xchristians.net, for example, is a great place to hear testimonies, if you want to call them that, or stories of people and their deconversions away from Christianity in whatever form, fundamentalist, liberal, whatever, theistic belief in general. That's usually a long, slow gradual process. Okay. So if I could throw out some terms, it would probably trace my personal evolution from ardent Christian Protestant theism to a general theism to agnosticism. Well, there was a little period there where I thought deism was attractive. The atheists pretty much destroyed deism in the 18th century, if you'll read the intellectual histories on it. They had some help, of course, from their Christian apologist friends, but then I became agnostic, leaning toward theism. Then I considered myself basically an agnostic, and I didn't quite know what those terms meant then. Agnostic is regards belief, or knowledge rather. Theism is belief. Atheism is a lack of theism. Doesn't tell you a damn thing about what I might believe. It just says I do not hold theistic beliefs. It has nothing to do about knowledge. What the guy knows.
Right, exactly.
Or what can you.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's where the big book gets that wrong, or the 12 and 12 that says the atheist.
Wilson,
yeah.
all of our shit gets wrong.
Yeah.
You know, Wilson never was a non-believer.
No.
He was never an agnostic. He was, by his own words,
right.
He was never an atheist.
Yeah, he wasn't.
He always was a believer.
Right.
He was not a theistic believer.
Right.
But he was a believer. He believed that there was this intelligence that kind of superintended it, very nebulous, woo-woo, fuzzy thing.
Right.
And he became a theist as a result of his conversion experience, his white light experience,
yeah,
the belladonna gig,
yep,
and his perception, his interpretation of that experience into the proposition that God is personal, he loves me,
right,
and he's going to do business in my life.
Right.
That's a different point of view than there's a cosmic intelligence out there somewhere.
Exactly.
So he was clueless.
Right.
And he was not a philosopher. He was not a religious historian. He was not a theologian.
Mm-mm.
But he tried to become a lay Christian apologist without Jesus in the big book. So, you know,
yeah,
those are technicalities. But those kinds of distinctions and definitions of words begin to bring some clarity into this picture.
Right.
Yeah. So eventually I was agnostic, leaning toward atheism, no theism.
Right.
Or theism. And then eventually one day I'm sitting there reading. The one thing I did not lose all these years was my fascination with history and philosophy and religion, literature, right?
Right.
That's been the one major undying passion in my life in terms of the life of the mind.
Right.
And I could read and think, drunk as a skunk, and write too, you know.
Yeah.
So I realized I am without theistic beliefs.
And this is while you're in AA, right? This is your...
No, this is before.
Before? Okay, gotcha.
Way before.
Gotcha. That's right.
This is me coming to be intellectually honest about what it is I believed or didn't.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I go, I am without theistic belief. Therefore, by definition, I am without theism.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Gotcha. So, how was it in AA?
So it bothered me.
Yeah.
It bothered me.
Yeah.
Because all of these beliefs I'd held for so long, even though they had been eroded by thinking. What do you do with that? What do you do with it?
So you show up in AA, and are you drawing similarities between what's going on in AA and your past experience with religion?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Without question.
Yep. And so how did you overcome that and stick with the program? How did you overcome that and deal with it to stay sober?
Well, one, I accept reality. That is the reality. I immediately began to, of course, explore our primary text, the big book, and read it several times in different kinds of ways. And to me, as far as my point of view about it is, it's essentially a theistic religious text. It is,
absolutely. AA is a religion. AA is a religion, in my opinion. It truly is a religion. I want it not to be a religion, but it is a religion.
For a lot of people, it damn sure is.
Yeah. If you treat it, I guess if you act like it's a religion and treat it like a religion, it is. And it was for me. It's not now, but it was.
Sure. And, well, even back during those days, John, it helped keep you sober, son, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, I can't knock it.
Even with those views.
And life was actually getting better, too. That's the thing, too. Yeah, everything was getting better.
Yeah, so it carried you along a positive path.
Yes.
Even though you come to the position later, well, X, Y, and Z here is completely false.
Exactly.
Right?
Right.
And in fact, if I hold those, those are really delusional beliefs.
Exactly.
Because there's no rational justification for believing those things to be true.
Right. Right.
You know, so it's just, that's kind of how we're wired.
Yep.
We believe a lot of shit that we've got no justification for, but if we're looking for justified true beliefs, that becomes a different question. But, you know, so I could see the first 4 chapters as essentially Wilson's long argument for the existence of a personal creator God who is all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful, and upon which, if you did not place your confidence in faith, you are probably going to just die drunk.
Right.
He's making that long argument.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes in pieces for the first couple of chapters, but once you get to chapter 4, that's where he sets out to become the lay theistic apologist,
right,
by laying out the reasons for believing that such a being exists.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And of course, when you begin to look at that chapter in the context of an argument,
yeah,
which it is, then every plank of that argument is predicated on a logical fallacy.
Right.
It does not follow. As an argument, it fails. His cosmological argument. What's interesting about those arguments to me is that if you go back to evangelical apologetics, the latter half of the 19th century, the first couple of decades of the 20th century, pretty much what you see in the big book is standard fare evangelical apologetics for the existence of God. That's what's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's far more Protestant and evangelical than people want to think about,
Mm-hmm.
But it takes some background to do those kinds of investigations. I knew a lot about it, so I see it.
Right.
But what else is going on in there? For example, if you look at the Serenity Prayer, which is not in the big book, right?
No, it's not.
That gets tagged on, and it's been in every meeting I've ever seen. If you look at the guts of that prayer, the core concepts come straight out of Stoic ethical philosophy, particularly Epictetus. Now, Reinhold Niebuhr did not credit Epictetus or the Stoics,
mm-hmm.
and he remodeled the thing so that it's a petition that serenity is a gift of God.
Oh.
But no, Epictetus says, and the Stoics said, serenity is a result of a rational exploration of these things that I have power and control over, the things that I do not have power and control over, and understanding the difference between those two things.
Well, isn't that interesting? I never knew that. I never knew that's where that came from. So he actually borrowed that from that's the ancient Greeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Roman. Epictetus was a Roman.
He's Roman. Okay.
This is the latter part of Stoicism.
Oh, okay. So he gets this from ancient times. I didn't know. I never knew that.
Yeah.
And he turned it into
Christians
more of
will come up with crap like that.
Yeah.
And rephrase it and try to claim some kind of originality, but in a sense, there's nothing that original on the planet.
No. It's kind of funny about the Serenity Prayer because some people some people think that the Serenity Prayer is a good alternative to the Lord's Prayer and that it's not sectarian or affiliated with religion or anything. Like, for example, if you go to New York City and go to meetings there, they don't say the Lord's Prayer, but they do say the Serenity Prayer. So do you think that that's even acceptable?
Yeah. I'm sure it is for some people, but for me, I'm a metaphysical naturalist. I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
The prayer, as put, is a petition to God who's going to give you something.
Yeah.
In my view, that God does not exist.
Exactly. Well, that's my view too.
You see, I'm without that. But the core concepts of what's going on inside that prayer came out of very rationalistic,
right,
non-theistic, philosophical thought.
Right.
Epictetus.
Right.
Epictetus's manual, to be specific. And once you begin to understand that, which I had been exploring for years,
mm-hmm.
Ancient Greek and Roman thought, that is the environment in which Christianity was born.
Yeah.
So, my curiosity, has been on all kinds of trails.
Yep.
There's a great deal of Stoic thought in the New Testament. And you get looking at it. For example, if you pick up Marcus Aurelius's Meditations and begin to read that
mm-hmm.
and think about the stuff you have heard in AA over the years, you're
mm-hmm.
going to go, holy shit, there's a lot of Stoicism in here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of basic religion.
I think there's going to be a thing about that at the convention. I think Jesse is going to do a panel on Stoicism in AA, and that's probably what he's going to be talking about, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he and I we talked about that when he and Dorothy made their little trip through across the plains and stopped for about 10 minutes. I got to meet those two.
Yeah.
And,
oh, cool.
They were pretty tired, but
so
they
he's
had
into
to
that.
Go. So, yeah, I'll be awesome to see Jesse again and everybody else that I get to meet.
But pretty much everything in AA is like that, where if you just take out the supernatural and you just focus on the action or the thought behind it, then it kind of makes sense.
Sure. One way to look at the 12 steps, for example, if you look at the end of, step 12, where we are putting these principles.
Yeah.
Principles are guiding our affair. Well, what is the principle of step 1? What is the principle of step 2 if you're taking theistic beliefs out of it? There's still a principle going on.
Yeah,
there.
Sure.
It's operating below the content, whatever, as written.
Right.
Same as step 3. So the first step is essentially, the way I talk about it for me is this basic surrender to this one fact about me and booze.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And the third ones really are extensions of a growing surrender to some other facts about existence. I do not control a great deal. Mostly everything is outside of my control.
Sure.
So there you go. So, and theologically, in the Christian context, is put in context of submitting to God, depending on God, and trusting God that He's got a bigger, better plan than you do.
Right.
Right? But it's a surrender. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's a wider surrender than just this fact about me and food.
Right.
It's the surrender. I really don't control very much.
Right.
I don't have power and control over very much at all.
Yeah.
So that's another way of looking at it, I suppose.
Yeah. So where you're at now, we kind of started with where you're at now. So you're very comfortable now as an atheist. You've been sober in AA for a long time. You go to traditional meetings. And so, and talk about that a little bit. How, so you're managing pretty okay with your traditional meetings?
As a traditional meeting goes, our group generally reads out of the daily reflection every day.
Right.
Which, it's agonizing.
It's a crappy book. I hated it when they first came out with it.
It's hyper evangelical. I mean, there's no question about it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And of course, the evangelicals here in the West Texas Bible Belt love the dog out of that because they look at AA as a field of pre-evangelism for their particular sectarian views.
Yeah,
and it's really what's happening there.
So, I mean,
a lot of
you'll go to your group, but at any given time, you do have other open atheists there. But so, is there do you have people that give you a really hard time about being an atheist?
Yeah, the first couple of years of my experience in AA, it was a daily ongoing holy war, pretty much perpetrated by two basic groups who were formed around two basic leaders.
Uh-huh.
One of those groups and leaders were of a literalist mindset regarding the Big Book.
The Big Book, yeah. We have a group like that here.
The other group, the other faction in this group, was led by a guy who was a liberalist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? He didn't take it literally. He was more open.
Right.
But they were involved in perpetuating a hostile daily situation for atheists. And there were 4 young atheists in the group when I got there. I watched them drive 4 of those people out of the room.
Wow.
I'm sorry, there's 5 of them. And I had nowhere else to go. I was 54. They were young.
Yeah.
The youngsters, they're not going to put up with much of that crap. They're not going to be around.
No. Nope.
And most old timers won't either. Most people won't.
No. Nope.
I was desperate and there was nowhere else to go. And as I was saturating my mind with the literature of AA and the history of AA and pretty much everything that I could get my hands on that Bill Wilson had written and begin to look at his evolution over time, I began to see a huge disparity between what was happening in that room as a practical matter.
Right.
And the larger, more diverse principles that are in play on paper about fellowship.
Right. And if you talk to old timers that have been around for 40 or 50 years, they'll tell you that, in the 60s and 70s, it really wasn't as religious as it is now, that it's become more fundamentalist in the 80s and 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And really that's that's a reflection of what's going on in the society, American society, with the evangelicals beginning to come out of the woodwork
right
in the 70s and re-engage in the political sphere.
right
And they shift to the right, farther to the right.
right
They become more vocal, more demanding, more derogatory of anybody not like them. And, we've got a Congress full of people like that now. And they control most of the state houses and legislature. We see the kind of legislation that those folks attempt to deploy upon all the citizens of the country.
And so our society has gotten really siloed.
The same process is going on inside of AA.
Yeah. And what's happened to AA, though, I think, too, is that the only people who are attracted to, the only people who will stick to AA, I think, are the religious people or people who can at least tolerate it. And so now that's the problem you have in AA, I think, is like if I go to my area assembly, the Western Missouri area assembly, I'm like the only open atheist there. But the only reason for that is the only people that will put up with AA are the people who are believers, who are okay with the belief system. If AA itself would loosen up, there would be more people like us of our mindset in AA. But it's tough to be one out of a couple hundred people who are standing out of the Lord's Prayer,
or one out of 6 people.
Yeah. And
it's no easier.
Yeah. Or if you're a young person, you're
it
like,
might be harder.
Yeah. It absolutely would be harder, especially if you're brand new, you're at the bottom of your life. You might not even want to live anymore, and you go to one of these goddamn meetings and people are telling you about God. And if you don't believe in God, you think, well, this is crazy. Now that's what people think now. Yeah. I think back then, for whatever reason, I think it was different. I think the times were different before the internet, that I would just accept crap easier than I would now. I think with the internet, you get more information and you're not going to accept, you're going to run into some situation. You can say, oh, this is bizarre. I'm not going to do this. But back then you didn't really have that much information and you just said, oh, okay, well, this is what you do.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
This is what you do. Yeah. This is what you believe. Think about it. That's just kind of, that's a very natural, there's a very natural explanations for all of that.
Yeah.
The information age really is the information age. It started with the printing press, and you and I happen to have lived during a period of time where it has just grown exponentially.
Oh, man. It's
it's mind-boggling. There's hardly any of us that can comprehend just how much this has grown. Think back, when I'm a kid, there's 2 channels on the television.
I know.
They go off at 10:30.
I know.
And one of the networks, there's 3 networks. I'm sorry, there was 3.
Right.
One of them stayed open after the news because Johnny Carson was on. It was Jack Parr before that.
Right.
And after that, it was the test pattern.
Right. I remember. I remember.
And they'd play the high flight poem and the guy flying a jet plane, which I loved as a kid. But that was it.
Yep.
Any other information in your little town he's raised in came from your preacher or your parents or the people at your church.
Yep.
Or small little local newspaper or the library. And that was it.
Yep. It was easier for AA to kind of control its message too, because the only thing you would know about AA, it was always positive. It seemed it was from some movie you saw, or maybe you read Dear Abby, or it was something like that. And like I never had any idea it was so damn religious. I honestly, I never read the 12 Steps. I never knew that God had anything to do with AA. When I was growing up as a kid, you did. I figured it was just like I don't know. And it freaked me out at first when I saw it, but then I did just go along. I was okay, say, oh, okay, well, there's got to be some psychological aspect to this. But then after a while, I guess believed, or I don't know what I did, but I was definitely one of those big book thumpers for a long time.
And it's almost surprising if it does not happen.
Yeah. I mean, because
think of it like that.
Yeah, you want to fit in. You want to
where he is.
Yeah. So and I knew exactly what to do.
Naturally.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
So,
I could learn that
people,
big book and everybody thinks I'm great, Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when an atheist starts quoting that big book and taking them to places they don't want to go, like the spiritual experience
Yeah.
2, and real places they really would rather avoid,
Yeah.
then it gets kind of crazy.
Well, I'll
so
tell
this
you
meeting
the funniest
today,
thing. Oh, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Oh, so this meeting today, I said there's 14 people there.
Yeah.
6 of them atheists. 2 of those people were hardcore Southern Baptist Christians.
Uh-huh.
And one of them, the guy, husband and wife, the guy goes to the morning meeting. He's actually part of NA, but he does NA and AA. Whenever I say something, whenever I start to say anything, he gets up out of his chair and walks out of the room.
Wow.
To this day.
Wow.
And here we are, this meeting going down, and there's no talk of God or spirituality at all, but just the whole process of self-examination, surrender, and, doing this in the context of other people, taking responsibility for our lives, trying to clean up our past, owning that stuff, living a more responsible, positive, productive life, as a series of actions. And we had just got the copy of the new Grapevine, which in the back of it says the October issue is going to be all about atheists and agnostics. And I held that up. And the guy's sitting right across the table from me. Uh-huh. And I go, and here's a historical event.
Yeah.
October issue of Grapevine is going to be all about atheists and agnostics in the AA who are still atheists and agnostics.
Cool.
And work the program in their very own ways.
Oh, man.
And in all kinds of ways. And here we are.
Yeah.
Wow. Now me and this guy, we get along fine outside of me.
Right.
I'm friendly to everybody. I really could care less what everybody believes.
Sure.
Right? And now they're awful damn concerned about what I don't believe, but that just goes with the church, right?
Right.
But for our brochure, for our conference in Austin, January 1st, I posted it up on the bulletin board. Uh-huh. It stayed there until June. Uh-huh. Which was shocking.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
What would have happened, within that first 3 years of my presence in the room, it wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yep.
But the last couple of months, we've had some guys that started coming to the morning meeting, and they're pretty much hardcore evangelicals. Mm-hmm. And so they've been taking that thing down.
Isn't that funny?
And now I'm up to number 10 now. Oh, I took a picture of it along with some other stuff I posted from our literature.
Yeah.
And finally, so they're trying to do this little holy war.
Right.
So if I attend that meeting and I start to say something, 4 of them get up out of their chair and walk out of the room.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's this ongoing holy war.
Yeah.
Some of the people, they just happen to be the more religious evangelical people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what I've started doing with them is asking them what the word theist means. Mm-hmm. And not a single goddamn one of them could tell me. And which is kind of typical.
Yeah.
I said, well, do you know what the word theism means? Mm-hmm. I said, well, unless you know what those words mean, you have no fucking clue.
Right.
What the word atheist means.
Right.
Maybe you ought to read a book, because they've been pretty shitty, so I'm going to get a little shitty back to them a little bit.
Yeah.
I noticed it started changing when I stopped being a doormat and a real nice guy and ignoring all the shit and calling their hand on this for shit.
Yeah.
That's what has changed.
Yeah.
That is what has widened the gauge. That cannot happen without conflict.
Right. Yeah, you're probably right about that. I chose not to do the conflict. I guess I could have I could have stayed at my old group and somehow fought to change it, but I just decided to leave and start an agnostic group. And
I know, and yeah. I love that. I love it.
Yeah.
I chose not to go that route.
Yeah.
It may eventually happen here, but if I could double down on these twin values of honesty and tolerance, which I think on paper, that's what AA is going after. If you look at fine total of a great deal of the General Service Conference stuff, and most certainly Bill Wilson's later views, that's what he was all about, widening those gates.
Absolutely, yeah.
Honesty and tolerance, that everybody needs to be welcome. We don't get to force our views on other people and have them feel like they don't belong because they don't believe like
well,
the
we
majority.
need people like you. We need the more atheists out there in the regular meetings. If we're just in our own little silos and we don't ever get to interact with each other, then we're really less likely to bring about any change. The change is going to happen by doing the things that you're doing. Like if you sit down the Lord's Prayer and you're the only one doing it, and then the next week you get another guy doing it, and the next month you got 4 or 5 guys doing it. That's how you change. If you and what I do, I just, I'm not changing anybody. We're just getting our own little place together, which is nice too. But I don't know, that all works together. I'm trying to tell myself I need to go to traditional meetings. I don't go to traditional meetings anymore.
All of it's necessary.
Yeah.
If you think about the Jews during World War II in Germany, what happened? They were rounded up and put in ghettos.
Right.
They were partitioned off from the rest of society. So, in a sense, though it has been necessary for non-believers to form their own groups.
Right.
That are, in fact, friendly toward non-believers and not hostile.
Right.
Really, for anybody,
Yeah.
But at least not hostile to the non-believer. That's a form of ghettoization.
Yeah.
Those people are subtracted out of these home groups,
right,
where they could actually have more of a long-term impact on the nature of AA than just go and hide and run. I had been hiding and running from a lot of things in my life, and decided that, hell, I even made a brochure for starting a group. And I was about 2.5 years sober. I was ready to firebomb the place and go black ops on some of these people and do some bodily injury to people. It's like crazy.
Yeah.
And I decided, no, I'm going to double down on honesty and tolerance. I wrote my first letter on toleration to the group, spread that around. That caused a fury. It broke the backs. It broke the backs of both the literalists and the liberalists.
Oh, that's funny.
The holy war came to a stop. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there's some things we're fighting for.
Yeah, you're right about that.
And so for me, I go to meetings and there's a lot of stuff that, most of us atheists just kind of, it's just part of the atmosphere.
Right.
But meaningful for some of the people in that room.
True.
Right.
Right.
And part of the tolerance is that, each guy's entitled to his own story. Each guy's entitled to, walk the path that only he can walk to keep himself sober. If those beliefs help him do that, I'm damn sure all for it.
Yeah, I am too.
I am too. But a lot of time that's not reciprocated, is it?
No, that's not.
No, it's not.
No.
So, the challenge is, what do you do about that when it's not reciprocated? You just got to continue doubling down on that.
Yeah.
And, realize that we all change.
Well, I deal with it just at the service level. I deal with it at just only. I don't have a problem in Kansas City with other people from outside other groups when I work in the districts and stuff like that. No problem whatsoever. But when I go to the area assembly where there's people from groups all over the western of Missouri, then I do. But it's kind of a subtle thing. They don't come up to me and directly confront me or anything like that. But if something's actually push comes to shove, then I find out what their views are and what they actually think of me. And it's really kind of eye opening when that happens. But,
well, usually before that even happens, don't you?
Yeah, you always have an idea.
They're giving you the evil eye.
Well, it was really funny. The first time I showed up there, I was kind of uncomfortable because I was the only agnostic group. I still am at the area assembly. I was the first agnostic group ever there. And I know that people were very suspicious of me. I mean, I had a guy that was friendly to me tell me that people were talking. I had another guy come up and tell me that someone had questions, but they would never ask me directly. They wouldn't talk to me directly. When it was time to have lunch, I'd be eating lunch alone while everyone else was at tables. It was kind of a lonely experience, but over time,
sure, this ostracism is real.
It is, but over time it got
painful,
different.
Isn't it?
It is.
It's painful, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
well,
now
it's designed to be painful.
It's not that way now though down there. I actually go there. I sit with people. I have lunch. They're more friendly. They know me, and it's a lot different. But I'm going to take it to the next level. I'm going to try to change a few things. But anyway, that's another story.
It's interesting, though. What happens over time, John? And you're experiencing that at the service levels.
Yeah, it is interesting.
If you give it time.
Yeah.
And you continue to express goodwill to everyone around you, even the ones that, by their looks and by their statements, you think they hate your guts, and some of them probably do.
Yeah.
But you continue to extend to them the right hand of fellowship, for example, acceptance. Not let that interfere with what you have in common.
Yeah, that's
over
true.
time. I think we underrate what can happen there.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I really do.
Yep.
We're going to have to experience pain of rejection, ostracism. Rumors, I could write a whole story on the rumors that have been started about me over 6.5 years.
Yeah.
By the religious components,
Yeah.
It's just going to be part of the turf. But I don't know. It's been a heck of a journey. I'm damn glad I'm sober.
Me too.
I have met so many fantastic people like you and all kinds of folks now from all over the world.
I know, isn't that amazing? I love that.
In recovery.
Yeah.
I do a lot of conversating with people in Facebook recovery groups, most of which are not. I do a little stuff on some of the groups that we all know about, but I like other groups where there's a big admixture of people and their various views.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those kinds of conversations get real interesting sometimes.
Yeah, I had to leave one of them. I left the rowdy rum because those people pissed me off.
Oh, they kicked me out of there.
Did they kick you out? I just left.
Oh, yeah. It was Christian cultish dogpile from day one because I was honest about being an atheist.
Yeah.
Seemed like the rest of the atheists were just playing patty cakes. And, playing the evasion game. and I was, that's what it is. But there's one called the Rum Rejects.
Oh, okay.
You get into there if you've been kicked out of the rum.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. Rowdy Rum's the biggest online pay cult I know of.
Yeah. It's going to be fun to see you in Austin.
There's some good people in there.
Yeah, there are. It'll be fun to see you down there in Austin. And are you doing any panels or workshops or anything?
No, really, I come to even talking about this pretty hesitantly. I really, I don't like. I like being behind the scenes kind of guy.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I guess some people are attracted to that. I never have been. I've been always more of a writer and a thinker and a doer in little ways.
Yep.
And
well, that's cool. This will be fun to see.
Yeah. But I'm looking forward to it, and I think a lot of you guys that hadn't been there will really like Austin.
Oh yeah, I've never actually been to Texas. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So that'll be fun.
Oh yeah.
I'm driving all the way down. We're driving from here. It's like a 10-hour drive.
That's the best way to do it.
All right, Mark. Well, I guess I think our tornado sirens might be going off here, but or maybe it's just anyway. I will. It was nice talking to you.
It's great talking to you, John. I appreciate everything you guys are doing over there at AA Bomb Belief and these old podcast things. I was hesitant to do this even.
Man, I tell you what, I love these podcasts.
Really enjoyed listening. I just have really enjoyed listening to how you do them and listening to your interviews, and they've been fantastic.
I tell you, it's a lot of fun to do. I get to meet so many interesting people. It's been a good experience. So good stuff. All right. Well, you have a good night, my friend. I'll be talking to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's it for another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. We'll be back next week with Ben B. for a discussion of steps 8 and 9. Until then, you take care and be well.